Good morning. I hope the weekend went well. It was beautiful outside, or good afternoon or good evening, depending on when you are completing your math. We this week are going to kind of take a break from decimals and we're going to go back to mixed numbers and fractions. So we are going to talk about how to multiply mixed numbers. So today's lesson is from 7-1. We are going to use the strategy of partial products and area models to multiply mixed numbers. So in third and fourth grade, when you multiplied whole numbers, you probably started using partial products. Some of you were still using partial products because that's the way you preferred when you came to Lee Eaton. So today we are going to use partial products to multiply mixed numbers. You may be like, oh my goodness, Miss Veggie, this is so much work. Yes, I do want you to have some scrap paper or in your math journal. I know on some of those pages there might not be enough room to show all your work, depending on how big you write. So you might need some scrap paper. Make sure you're showing your work. The most common mistake I will show you and point out is not showing your work and just like, I'm going to do it quick, I'm going to do it my way, but then you're not technically multiplying the whole amount in one factor with the whole amount in the other factor. So we have to keep in mind the distributive property and make sure that we are distributing every number. And actually, partial products, guys, is something you're going to use when you get to algebra and you talk about foiling. So it's not going to go away. So let's start with partial products of a whole number. Just to remember what exactly partial products looks like. So if I asked you to solve 28 times 6, most of you now would use the traditional method, but we are going to use partial products and the area model. So remember, an area model means we have a rectangle or a square, and we take 28 and break that up in expanded form. I'm going to draw the box this way because 20 is bigger than 8, so visually I'm going to show that with the box being bigger. So 20 plus 8 gives us 28. So I break that up. That's my length. I have a length of 20 and a length of 8. And then 6 is going to be over here on my width. And now I can come up with the partial products. So I'm going to list them over here. I have 20 times 6. Which is 120. So I put that in there. That area is 120. And then my second partial product is I have a length of 8 and a width of 6. So I have 8 times 6 is 48. And then our last step is to add those together. So 120 plus 48 gives us 168. So our answer to 28 times 6 is 168. So that is how we use partial products to solve whole number situations. So we are going to use that to do multiplying mixed numbers. So I would grab a piece of paper, pause the video, get a piece of scratch paper, so that way you can practice this along with me. And I will ask you to get your math journal out so we can do a problem in there. But for now, we're just going to do some practice ones. So our first practice one is going to be 4 2/3 times 7 equals, we don't know yet. So if you see that problem in your math journal, the first thing you should do is let's draw our square or rectangle so we can figure out our partial products. And we're going to list out all our partial products too. We're not just going to find them in our head. So just like we broke up 28 to 20 and 8, we're going to take 4 2/3 and break that up, our whole number and our fraction. So again, we're going to divide our box. I'm going to divide it this way to show that 4 and then 2/3. So 4 is bigger than 2/3, hence the bigger box. And I broke that up. I have my whole number with my fraction. Now my second factor is just 7, so I do not need to break that up. I'm just going to call that 7. So now we have to list out our partial products. So our width is 7, our length is 4. So the first partial product is 7 times 4, which we know is 28. So fill that in. Now our second partial product is 7 times, right, 2/3, because that's our length. Uh-oh. This goes back to Unit 5 when we learned how to multiply whole numbers with fractions. Oh no. What do we need to put under the 7? Right, a 1. And then we can just multiply across. So 7 times 2 and 1 times 3 gives us 14/3. So we could leave it as an improper fraction, but let's get some practice in. Let's make this into a mixed number. How many times can 3 go into 14? So if you're not sure, you could count by 3s until you get close to 14 without going over. But it goes in 4 whole times with a remainder of 2. And remember, your remainder goes in your numerator and your denominator stays 3. And we just talked about that last week, so that should be pretty fresh in your brain. So 7 times 2/3 is actually 4 2/3. Now, if you left it 14/3, that would still be correct, but we know how to make it into a mixed number, so we should. So then finally, our last step is going to be add our partial products together. So we had 28 plus 4 2/3. And this is another reason we made it into a mixed number, because it'd kind of be silly to add 14/3. So 28 plus 4 is 32. And 2/3 plus no fraction on the other is just 2/3. So our answer is going to be 32 2/3. So you might be like, wow, Miss Vegetallen, that was all for one problem? Yes, it is. But what happens is a lot of people look at this problem. Let me change my color. Let me point out what a lot of people do and that it's incorrect. And I'm going to write wrong. So a lot of you will say, oh, well, I just have to multiply the mixed number, take that whole number and multiply it with that whole number there, and 4 times 7, well, that's 28, and then there's 2/3 times I don't have anything here, so I'm just going to write 2/3. Is that the same thing? No. So just by multiplying the whole number with the whole number, you are not going to get the right answer, because we have to multiply 2/3 with 7 also. You have to distribute every number over to the 7. So don't fall victim of doing it the wrong way. I see many, many times you guys are doing it the right way, and then all of a sudden you get tired of showing all your work, and then you're like, well, I'll just do whole number times whole number, and that's my answer. That is not correct. Do not fall victim to that. Let's try another one, but this time, instead of multiplying a mixed number with a whole number, I'm going to do a mixed number times a mixed number. So that's going to look a little bit different, because now we have 4 things to multiply together instead of just 2. So we have, let's do 1 3/4 times 2 1/3. So this time, I'm going to draw a larger box because I have 2 mixed numbers. So 1 3/4 needs to be broken up with whole number and fraction. So we're going to have the 1, and then we're going to have 3/4, and we're going to draw a line to cut that. But now on our width side, we don't just have a whole number. We have a 2 and a 1/3. So we're going to have to break that up on the width side and draw a line. So now we have 1, 2, 3, 4 partial products defined to answer this question. So let's get to it. Our first box here is 2 times 1. So that's our partial product. Remember, we are listing out our partial products on the side, which is 2. And then let's go over here to our second box. We now have 2 times 3/4. So remember, when you're multiplying a whole number with a fraction, you put a 1 under your whole number, multiply across, which gives us 6/4. Let's simplify that. 4 can go into 6 one time with 2/4. Or some of you may say, well, 2/4 is a half. So I'm going to write 1 1/2. But we're not done. We have these 2 boxes. So let's look at this second box. 1 times 1/3. Oh, that's a pretty easy. Is 1/3. And then our last box, 1/3 times 3/4 equals 3/12. So we have 4 partial products. So remember, our last step is to add them together. But do you see why adding these together may be difficult? Great. We do not have common denominators. 2, 3, and 12 are not common. And remember, we cannot add fractions without common denominators. But here is a little tip. If you look in this bottom box, so this box, the denominator is 12. Well, I know that I can multiply, and this works for every single one, guys. As long as you set it up whole number fraction, this will work for every single one. So in this box, I know that my denominator is 12. I know I can multiply 3 by 4 to get to 12. And I know I can multiply 2 by 6 to get to 12. So 1/3 could really be called 4/12. And 1 1/2 could really be called 1 6/12. So in this bottom box here, this is always going to be your common denominator. Whatever this denominator is in this box, you can change this fraction and this fraction to that denominator. It will always work. So now I can add them because I have common denominators. So I have 2 plus 1 6/12 plus 4/12 plus 3/12. So I have my whole numbers of 3, and then 6 plus 4 is 10, plus 3 is 13/12, which is improper, so let's make it another whole. So our answer turns out to be 4 1/12. I will say, guys, that does require quite a bit of work, right? When we're multiplying a mixed number with a mixed number. Just take it one step at a time. Because if you just did 1 times 2 and 3/4 times 1/3, that would not be correct because you're not using the distributive property and multiplying everything on one side with the other side. So let's take out your math journal and try one in there. So open up to page 233. While you get your math journal out, I will erase my board. Let's make it the biggest eraser. And then let's take a look at number 1. So number 1 is 3 1/8 times 4. So we are on page 233. And it's 3 1/8 times 4. So we need to draw our area model. And you can see in your book, they want you to list your partial products. So 3 1/8, we need to split up. We have a whole number of a 3 and a fraction of 1/8. So we're going to split those along the length. And then our 4 is just our width. We do not have anything else with the 4, so we do not need to split it. So now we can find our partial product. So in our first box here, we have 3 times 4. Yep, that's 12. And then in our second box here, we have 4 times 1/8. Remember, put a whole number or a 1 under your 4, under your whole number there. 4 times 1, 1 times 8. So you could leave it 4/8, or you should know that that is also called a half. So we'll call it a half up here, simplified. So then your last step to get your answer is to add your partial products up. So 12 plus a half gives us 12.5. Pretty simple, right? That's why it was number 1. Let's look at, I'll do one more with you because you have page 233 and 234 to complete for this lesson. So let's look at 3 because that's a mixed number times a mixed number. Let's practice one of those one more time. And I know this video is long, guys, but I want to make sure that you're understanding. And it's hard being home to see if you're getting the math or not. So just do one more problem with you. So number 3 is 4 1/6 times 1 2/3. Have my area model there. Use purple this time. So I need to break up my first mixed number, 4 1/6. And guys, just to let you know, it doesn't matter if I put 4 1/6 over here on my width or on my length, because remember, when we multiply, we have the commutative property where it doesn't matter if I do 2 times 3 or 3 times 2, we're going to get 6. So I just like doing the first mixed number at the top. If you prefer the side, that's okay also. So 4 1/6, let's break that up, our whole number of 4, and then draw our line and our fraction of 1/6. Okay, then for our width, we have 2 numbers also. We have 1 and 2/3. And again, the reason I'm drawing it bigger for the whole number is because obviously a whole number is bigger. It doesn't have to be, but I'm trying to visually show you that this is going to be the biggest number here. This is going to be, oops. So that would be the biggest number here. Then we have these two that are going to be pretty close, if not. And then this is going to be our smallest. So let's do our partial products. So this first box right here is what I'm going to look at is 1 times 4. Which is 4. Then the second box is 1 times 1/6, which is 1/6. Then the third box is 2/3 times 4. I know I'm doing this, guys, but you should be solving along with me. 2 times 4. It's going to be 8/3, or how many times is 3 going to 8? Let's see. 2 times with 2 left over. So we can also call it 2 2/3. And then our last box is 2/3 times 1/6. Which is 2/18. So our last step is to add them all together. But it's not that easy to add these together because look, I have 3, I have 6, and I have 18. But if you remember, if you look in this bottom box, 18 can be our common denominator. Because I know if I multiply 3 by 6, I get 18. And if I multiply 6 by 3, I get 18. So the reason that this corner box is going to be your common denominator always, always, always is because, look, you're multiplying 3 and 6 together. That gets you your common denominator. So let's rewrite 2 and 2/3 with a common denominator. So 2, and then 18, and 2 times 6 is 12. And then let's write 1/6 with a common denominator. So 3/18. Now I can add them together. So I have 4. I have 3/18. I have 2 and 12/18. And then I have 2/18. So let's add our whole numbers first. So I have 4 and 2. And then I have 3 plus 12 is 15. Plus 2 is 17/18. So my answer to 4 and 1/6 times 1 and 2/3 is 6 and 17/18. So yes, I know that that was a lot of steps, and actually that's a lot of stuff we learned in 5th grade. We learned how to do area models. Again, we talked about partial products. We learned how to add fractions. We learned how to make common denominators, and we learned how to multiply fractions with whole numbers and fractions with fractions. So everything in 7-1 is kind of like all the stuff we learned in 5th grade coming together. So it definitely is going to require you to show your work and maybe do a little extra thinking. Do not, my last warning, do not fall victim of the common mistake of just doing 4 times 1 is 4. I'm going to write wrong again. And 1/6 times 2/3 is 2/18. A lot of people will do that. Do not fall victim to that. Do not just multiply your whole number with your whole number and your fraction with your fraction. That is wrong. You must do the partial products in the area model to get the right answer. So I am going to leave you to work on page 233 and 234. Make sure that you are showing your work and then checking your work with the answer key. Of course, if you have any questions or are getting stuck, send me an email and I'd be more happy to help. Have a good day, guys. Thanks for sticking out the lesson. I know it was a long one today. Bye.